this morning. There's some great cupcakes. Not that I would really know. Not that I tasted them or anything at $7.50. I asked Trent's wife, what is her name? Stacy, thank you. Stacy to make cupcakes for us. Actually, Jeff. But we did that because, if you notice, we got little sprinkles on them. A little celebration. Because we know, well, we've gotten the word that probation will be removed. So I wanted to just give a little packet to you in the form of a cupcake with sprinkles on it to again say thank you. We typically have donuts this morning, but I thought we'd be on a sugar high. So there's soft drinks out there, there's water out there, there's coffee, and there's cupcakes. We've had a very busy year. And I keep thinking things are going to slack up and they just somehow don't manage to do that. We are in the middle of a search for the new president, and that is going very well, right on target. Christina and Travis and Ashley are the faculty representatives on the search committee. And I think you're going to be pleased once those are announced of the caliber of individuals that have applied. And so it's going to be exciting times to see what happens. But be on the lookout for announcement coming soon about who the finalists are and so forth. And that's pretty much all I can tell you. I wish I could tell you more, but we've been sworn to secrecy, right, Travis?
Right?
We've been sworn to secrecy.
No, it's pretty hard.
It's real hard. But we've had a lot of excellent candidates to apply, so you should be very pleased. Anything that anybody wants to ask me?
We don't have numbers in here. I think the rest of us can take it as some information.
No, we don't want to do anything. It is going so smoothly. We don't want to do anything that will jeopardize. But I think we're going to be pleased with the caliber of individuals that have applied and that became finalists for your next one. But we're right on target on timeline that we established in the beginning. So hopefully we'll be able to announce. I think it's the end of April we'll announce for sure. Is that correct?
Something like that, yeah.
Sometime in April.
Yeah.
The announcement will be made when the new president started July 1. So again, exciting times. I know there's been a lot of kinks this semester. It seems like in a variety of things. I'm not sure why. I know we've had trouble with cadets getting on LEDA and different things like, getting on LEDA, getting on Moodle, the cadets from LEDA getting on Moodle. But I think it's just part of the course of some semesters are easier than other semesters. But we've got a lot of exciting things that are happening. We are expanding our concurrent offerings to offer criminal justice and hopefully ag, that sort of thing as concurrent. Janine and Rex and I and Rhonda met with Lisa Grooms from Hillcrest High School, and we're going to be allowing their students to do ag classes as concurrent, hopefully getting them into CPs and that pathway. So there's a lot of things occurring right now. Anything in the area of genetics you want to talk about? No. Okay.
Book
Philip?
orders.
Okay, what?
Yeah, everyone has book orders due to 15.
Okay, don't forget. Philip, where are you?
I'm here.
Okay, anything from business technology?
That's really sometimes just finish up your book order and if you have any ready for you.
Okay.
We got this meeting that's had ready on my schedule. Back ready for you.
Rhonda, anything comes in your area?
You're doing great. The quarters are done.
Look at her.
Not me. Don't look at me.
Look
Look at them. Look at them.
Yes, I know.
They do
And
great
they're
job.
all right there.
They do a great job.
Yes. Successful.
It's called respect. Things right.
Yeah.
Lots of changes.
Okay. Randy, anything? Okay. Alan, anything outside? Okay. Steve is sick today, but do y'all know anything new in Lincoln that we need to be aware of? How many days do we have right now? Busy? Okay. This seems to be a good class. They seem nervous, or they look at her, or I'm getting help. They get a combination of things. But enjoy today, you're going to be, fed a lot of good information. This is something to be led, and that's what we want to have happen, from this point on. So, with that, Priscilla, anything new that we need to know?
It's really kind of boring and there's not very much.
Okay, yeah, I think so. Anything else, Debbie? All right, I'm gonna turn it over to Sissy. Thank you, Sissy, and all the, assessment advisors. Thank you.
Good morning. Very rarely can I start off any kind of workshop or presentation without talking about HLC. So just to kind of give you a timeline, I'm just reiterating probably what you've heard before. But with what we anticipate, without having our formal letter yet, we anticipate, of course, going off of probation any day now. The badge is still showing probation on our website. HLC controls that. We're checking it to see, we're assuming they're going to wait until they get their receipt showing that we received the certified letter before they change the badge. But we're excited to, anticipating the probation being removed from our website and looking forward, fall 2020, we will have monitoring reports. Actually, I've always said report, there are two subjects, they will probably combine them into one single report that we submit, but focusing on academic assessment, strategic planning, and the assessment of our support unit for non-academic functions. So we will be compiling that. We're working on it now in anticipation of it, but of course, that's not very far away, fall of 2020. We don't know, what month or after the deadline will be set. But we anticipate that, and then, let's see, we'll have a comprehensive review again, likely spring of 2023. So what we just went through in September, we will be doing that entire process again, spring 2023, give or take a semester. They could move it back earlier to the fall before, or later to the fall after. Hopefully the certified letter that we're expecting will give us an exact deadline timeline for that. Any questions about HLC?
Really, it's not Do
I sent out an email yesterday, I don't know if you all had a chance to check, just to make sure everybody's aware. After lunch, we will have a group of concurrent instructors joining us. Lisa Inman has agreed to do a kind of a mini breakout session with them on assessment, and they will also be joining us in some of the workshop activities we're doing this afternoon. So, just to give you a heads up on that. We're going to start out with a workshop on general education outcomes. Many of you, as we've we're near the end of our cycle for the first 3 years of assessing general education outcomes. Many of you have come to me and said, oh, I just do not agree with the way I initially mapped my courses on the Master Gen Ed curriculum map. Most of the time, you've had a legitimate explanation. Some of you I think just understand what it means now, and we're trying to get off of the mastery of this. But, for the most part, I think everybody has had a good justification, but we've not had a process for changing that master map. So that's what I hope to accomplish by the end of the day today. Have you justify revisions, we'll make them, we're done, moving forward, even before the end of this process. So it really only could affect quantitative literacy for the most part, but you will at least know moving ahead where your courses are mapping. And I think you are more knowledgeable about what that map means and how to map. And I want to do a brief review of general education outcomes and how to map and what mapping really means prior to getting into that exercise. Any questions? So somebody tell me, what are general education outcomes? Not ours, not the five we have, but what is a general education outcome?
Basic things that our students are gonna accomplish when they leave our college.
Thank you, Bonnie. Basic things that our students are going to accomplish when they leave. Yeah. So, they represent that common thread of competencies that are attained by students across all programs at Black River. So, in other words, they exemplify the knowledge and skills that every student earning an associate degree or technical certificate are expected to achieve, regardless of major. What are the five gen ed outcomes that we have?
Communication.
Quantitative literacy.
Information.
Literacy and communication.
I heard them all. Good, you guys still seem really uncertain, I know you know this. Critical thinking, global learning, information literacy, communication, quantitative literacy. This is small, the best I can do presenting our timeline, general education outcomes assessment timeline for you all. And I hope you, for the most part, you know it. We started this 3-year cycle in fall of 2017 with the collection of critical thinking outcomes. And how did we choose the courses that had the embedded critical thinking assignments or artifacts? Through the curriculum maps, right?
Yeah.
If you had a course or courses mapped as mastery to critical thinking, then you had to submit an artifact for every student in that course or courses during fall 17 semester. Then in spring of 2018, we did global learning. In last fall, information literacy. For those of you with courses mapped to communication, you are in the process of collecting artifacts, and we'll have those submitted by the end of this semester. And then quantitative literacy will finish up the collection process in fall of 19. So what this timeline does not show is the spring of 2020, which is actually the last semester of to complete the full 3-year cycle. During that semester, all data will be aggregated, put in a nice report form, and disseminated to you all. And we will have a meeting like this where we come together and talk about what changes we want to make institutionally to improve upon whatever we decide needs to be improved upon. So let's say critical thinking is shown to be our weakest link in our gen ed curriculum across the board. Is not speaking directly to general education instructors. Remember, many of you that teach in programs have programmatic courses that are mapped here as well. So this applies to everyone. We'll talk about what can we do across the board to improve students' critical thinking skills, for example. And that may not be what maybe we'll do. Today we'll show you did very well in critical Absolutely. Now I plan to get to that. If you still have questions, let me know. A couple of recommendations that I anticipate will come out of that meeting that we have already. One, those of you that have served as raters for artifacts, and several of you have, we need to look at our rubrics again. Possibly making them more applicable to our student body. They were based upon the AAC&U's value rubrics, which is a national project. That was a very good place for us to start when we started this process, because we hadn't done assessment before. But now the raters have come back to me, many of them have said, you know, I think we could make these rubrics more relatable to our student body, to a 2-year student body than what they are. So I anticipate that part of this evaluation process will simply be coming up with some revised rubrics. Another recommendation, when this assessment process was originally designed, we decided that the Associate of Arts degree would basically follow this exact same assessment process, and we would just pull out all of the courses that were in the AA, basically disaggregate the data within our database and use that. And that's caused a lot of problems, and I won't go into that, but what we anticipate is that when we do get to the point that I explain those to you all, that you will agree that the AA needs its own set of outcomes and its own assessment process. So, again, we'll look at the data specific to each outcome, but there are also recommendations that we'll make to the process itself as we continue to become more familiar with assessment and what its purposes are, and to make it serve us better. Any questions about that? So let's look at what curriculum mapping is. So hopefully I'm going to address some of your questions here. Curriculum mapping is a process of identifying where specific learning outcome-related content is taught. In other words, which courses certain content is taught to ensure that it's thoroughly addressed within a program. And program in this context refers to our general education program. Those skills and abilities that we believe those 5 should be crossing over across all of our programs. Curriculum mapping can provide an overview of the program and the student experience, including the identification of strengths. So for example, if we have critical thinking mapped in 15 classes, that should represent a strength for us. Or gaps in the curriculum program. Quantitative literacy makes sense. It's not mapped to as many courses, but that we'll see how that plays out. That could end up meaning that that's a weaker area for us that we need to more deliberately focus upon. As well as suggest course sequences. That's more specific to program mapping. Many of you also have program maps, and you may have realized when you're going through mapping programs or course outcomes to program outcomes that maybe you need to change the sequence of some courses. Maybe you are mastering something in the course that right before it was even introduced or reinforced. So again, course sequencing consequences. The process of curriculum mapping also helps rationalize the inclusion of specific courses in the programs. Curriculum mapping is all about teaching. It answers questions of where, how often, and to what degree specific content is presented to students. So why do curriculum mapping? So what are we hoping to achieve by creating these maps? One, alignment. Either course alignment, content or alignment within the program, between general education and institutional goals, which is more what we're focusing on today. So alignment in some way. Identifying where and how particular outcomes are expected, explicitly taught for and assessed. Backward, sometimes they can be used in backward designs for curriculum. This is particularly helpful when you're creating a new program. So most of you will have experience with that particular type of curriculum map, but I think within healthcare there have been some curriculum maps created to go along with a proposal for a new program, or could have, and they can help you sequence courses by doing those maps on the front end. And then understanding the nature and role of course prerequisites. I don't think we've ever talked about that before, but some of you teach in programs where you have prereqs and your expectation is through those prerequisite courses, students are coming in with skills and abilities already. And so you want to make sure that those prerequisite courses are truly teaching those skills and abilities that you're expecting. Curriculum maps can help answer a lot of questions. For example, in key courses, are all outcomes being addressed, and are they being addressed in a logical order? Do all key courses address at least one outcome? Do multiple offerings of the same course address the same outcome, same levels? I'm not going to read all of these. There are a whole lot of questions that curriculum maps, when properly done, they can help us answer. And we'll be posting these slides, these PowerPoints to Portal. And I will take a moment to mention, we have 4 faculty assessment champions. Aja Lloyd and Matt Smith are out at conferences today or at other obligations. Jessica Alford and Lisa Inman are here today, and they'll be helping me present. So mapping our courses to our gen ed outcomes. Several semesters ago, every course taught was mapped to our general education outcomes. If you were here at that time, you should have been involved in that process, and I think most of you remember doing that. We use the IMR mapping model, or IRM. Anybody want to tell me what that means?
Introduce, reinforce, and master.
Right, so for every course taught, we decided is an outcome introduced, reinforced, or mastered. And there are cases there was no mapping at all. There was something that was not even introduced. Of course, I always think about intro to science. Quantitative literacy is not even really formally introduced there, so there's nothing mapped there. So you have 4 options when mapping an outcome to a course. Nothing, introduced, reinforced, mastered. What does each one of those mean? So Rex, here you go. Introduce. Students are introduced to the outcome formally in some way. So you have a unit, a chapter, some kind of content that formally introduces a concept. Now that doesn't mean, like, take critical thinking, for example. That doesn't mean you say, okay, today we're going to do a unit on critical thinking. It doesn't have to be that deliberate, but the underlying purpose of a unit or content should be critical thinking. That's what you're hoping to instill in a student. Does that make sense? Reinforce. Students have already had the opportunity to be introduced, and now you are further developing an outcome. So somewhere in the sequence of the degree plan or sequence of courses, there has been an introduction to whatever outcome you're looking at. Now they're getting it again. You don't expect them to master it, but you're trying to reinforce any skills and abilities and knowledge that was taught in a previous course. And then mastery. Students should demonstrate mastery of the outcome at a level expected for a community college student. Okay? That's a italicized for emphasis. So at a level you would expect for somebody who has completed an associate. I know that it's still a little vague, but the best I can come up with operationally, right? Does that help?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, you know, like, you have introductory courses, are they actually mastery?
That is such a good question, and I think the English instructors provide, the English courses provide some of the best examples of that. They're hit the hardest. English instructors rarely go a semester without submitting something. I know they are so looking forward to quantitative literacy being done, and I get it. But English 1 and 2, a student takes those classes, do we really, you know, is it fair to say they have mastered? And that's why we call 2 years. Okay? We don't expect them to have mastered those skills to the same extent that somebody with a bachelor's degree would have.
So if we have a course like freshman one, can we ever say we're reinforcing or do we have to introduce? It's like I would say we're introducing in writing fundamentals, but not everybody takes writing fundamentals. But does that test that they pass indicate that they don't need the
I
introduction?
think you can make that justification. Yes, so you have developmental coursework leading up to an introductory level course. You can justify that it's acting as an R rather than an I. But that's where you come in as experts. I cannot and do not want to tell you how to map your courses. Now, I'm about to make some strong suggestions for some of you. But nonetheless, you're the content experts. Right? So you, as a department or as programmatic faculty, and some of you are on your own. And you're one, you're a program department of one. You make that decision on your own. But nonetheless, I want you to, we're going to work as within programs and departments as best we can for you all to collaborate and decide how you think your courses should be mapped. And if you want to take the introductory course and then map it through enforcement, and you have development coursework that you can justify that, you can have it. Other questions?
Would agency think that, you know, you put it out
Yes. I don't think so. I think what HLC knows is right, you're right. But I think what HLC would see is they want to see faculty ownership and that there's respect for faculty as experts in their content area. They would take it to somebody else dictating what the matter is. That's my perspective.
And I'm not, in small schools.
So that's a good question. I know you're right. That is one disadvantage to having programs that in small community colleges.
Okay, so we only care about the classes we're marking in. Why are we actually marking things I and R? Is it something they're gonna look at? Or is this just for our own purposes to make sure that we're looking at each class?
Both. I really hope that this helps you evaluate your course sequencing and what you are teaching in your courses. So that as a program, there might be some red flags to you that nobody else would catch. And maybe it would relate to curriculum redesign in some way. It's led to deletion of courses for us. In the business department, there was some overlapping of courses in a few instances. And I remember seeing some proposals for deletion of courses. New course creation, even. So I'm hoping you're looking at it from that perspective. But also, HLC requires us to submit curriculum maps.
Gotcha.
So, Word documentation said, even if you are not using it the way I hope you are, we had to have it for documentation. Alright, so here's what we're going to do. Jessica, you did the program, do you want me to go on and do some workshop, or do you want to
Yeah.
work and keep back and then do?
No, it's fine.
You tell me what you think would work.
Let's just do this while it's on everybody's mind, and then we'll do the next one and work on it.
So we may not get all the way through this, but I'm going to start this process, okay? So, you're going to get into groups by department or program. Okay. And
let's go.
we're going to review your map. So one of the reasons I have this in the computer lab, I sent you all the master curriculum map. So the original one that was created, okay? So you should all be able to pull that up in your email. Look at the courses you teach and look at how they're mapped. Then I want you to look at your course description. So you want to pull up the catalog or syllabus that you have. And you reevaluating the course description and submitting a proposal for a revised course description, okay? So look at those two things, taking those into consideration with your expertise in your content area, and decide if there's a course that needs to be remapped. Okay? If you are going to move something from introduce or reinforce to mastery, probably not going to argue with you. You want to take something down from mastery, first of all, everyone in your program or department has to agree. Then you have to convince me or an assessment champion of your justify to us, and then I'll change it. And then it's done. It's a permanent change. Nothing beyond that. You need to just have everybody in your unit convinced, and then justify it to one of us, and we'll change it. Okay? A couple of the other documents that you have that I sent to you. So you have the master curriculum map. You also have I sent you a PDF, I think, how I downloaded it from your file. I've already taken the luxury of going through the course description for every course in the catalog. And I looked for the words critical thinking or synonyms. I looked for words global learning or synonyms. And if they were in your course description, they show up on this list. Okay? So I'm already aware of what that I think they need to be changed in Master's Master. I did not do the same for your learning outcomes. This is very time-consuming after but look at your learning outcomes. Look at your course descriptions. And again, this is not dictating to you that your courses should be mapped. Perhaps you decide you want to reevaluate the course description. Or maybe there's another reason. Okay? Something that came up with programmatic courses. I'll use respiratory as an example. There are several respiratory courses that had critical thinking show up. But look at them. There were courses that had 4 or 5 courses that built upon each other. Really mastered should only be in the last 1 or 2. So, fine. That's a good enough justification. Any questions about where you can change the map. It's one shot thing without having to go through formal procedures to get things approved. Okay? You do them within a workshop and get this way, if we're going to change it on the map, we're done, it's changed. It'll be not much more difficult, but a more formal process. We're going to require you to go through, the curriculum committee, etc. committee, to change it moving forward. So if you still have things that you want to change, I'll give you a week's window, and then the new map we have is considered fixed, okay? And
Some of the other things that we have discovered in going through that, of course, we're the most concerned right now with the mastery, those courses that map to mastery, because those are the artifacts that we collect and we're reporting down on in these different cycles. But a lot of people have found that where we have introduction, it should actually be a reinforcement. And so if you want to change that portion of your map, that needs to be done next week as well, right? So that we can get everything fixed. Business, for instance, we were talking about it, and I think in the beginning, a lot of us looked at it from the programmatic standpoint, where we introduce it, we reinforce it, we master it within our program. But these general education outcomes, we are looking at how those courses that we're teaching in the programs are mapped to those general education outcomes. For instance, if anybody takes an English or a math prerequisite to that program, we're not technically introducing information or quantitative literacy or communication in those courses. We're introducing them in English 1 and in our algebra, community algebra, things like that. Not for the reinforcement. We don't want everything to be introduced. But if you think that it's probably not the first time that they have been exposed to regulations, it should be a part of it.
So it's not necessarily that, it's just that.
You might have it in another course. You might have it in another course of your program. Just like what we were talking about earlier. So yes, any questions about the sweet timeline? If you've gotten either changes, you go ahead or Jessica, or Lisa, and we make changes on our notes, and expect those changes will be made. And I will disseminate this map when it's final, and you can look through it one more time and have a change of call time, we didn't make a change requested. So. All right, well, I'm gonna turn it over and let Jessica do a presentation on the annual program reports and the self-studies. There are a couple of notes I want to make. First of all, one of the documents I sent you was a proposed policy change for our policy that stipulates participation in these processes. 7112. Now, the cabinet has approved these changes. The board has not. So that's why I'm sharing them with you as proposed changes. I have no reason to expect the board will not approve these changes at the next board meeting in May. But what you will notice is the deadline, the due date for the program reports and the self-studies has changed if they're not made. Okay, they're all the rationale, this does not give you some extra months to really be working on these. We would expect that the bulk of these documents are completed in May. But as Jessica and Matt were working on preparing this presentation, they realized that some of the data requested in these documents refers to graduation and completion rates, and you don't have those in May. So we're taking time for that information to come through, and then you report it, all of that information in a completed program report or self-study or both in August. Does that make sense? Why we're extending it in August? And it's last day of August. So even though the formal policy has not changed, has not been approved, we anticipate that it will, and we're going to work toward that August 31st due date. Okay? Nonetheless, we should be beginning working on these, and I hope today we'll get a head start. So, when we started with the assessment training program, part of some of the things that we were expected to do was professional development. And so when we started thinking about professional development, I sent out a Google form and asked what would you guys be interested in hearing more about. And we could do like some small groups, or we could do some Q&A sessions. And specifically, Matt and I picked, I'm not really sure why now, but we picked the annual program report and the self-study. And so, in that, I didn't get very many answers on it. But we're all really busy. But I am going to try and answer a few of those questions. And the biggest thing that everybody asked was just a step-by-step walkthrough of how we complete the report. And so, what's my role in this assessment? And so, the system's going to be really proud when I say assessments everybody's job. And we have done a really good job. It's evident by what's happening with you. So,
Hi,
these
Jess.
reports,
Jess.
now they're specifically.
Jessica.
What?
Hey, we can't hear you over there.
Okay. These reports, while they're specifically completed by probably your program chair or your department, program director, it's going to take information from every faculty member in order to put these program reports together. In addition, our assessments and our reports, they should be meaningful, right? Work. And so what we're hoping is, based on the information and the meetings and discussions that we have in completing these reports, that we'll actually be able to make some changes that will be meaningful for our students. And a lot of times we found these changes need to occur at either the platter level or the faculty level. And so that's why even if you're not responsible for completing the report, that you're gonna be instrumental in why we need the information and then also getting it to whoever is responsible for that for you. Sissy talked about it just a few minutes ago, that those, while we have our gen ed outcomes, that doesn't necessarily refer to our gen ed AA program. And so coming up shortly with that AA program is going to have its own set of outcomes. And so the AA will also have a program, annual program report, and a self-study. And so that's why everybody's in here, not just the individual programs. And then your roles. Keeping your platters and your platters up to date. You're pretty good about that, but if we have to pull that information, we want to make sure that it's the most current information. Not just like last year's or last semester's. Keeping your documentation regarding what works and what doesn't. A lot of this information is what changes did you make and was it successful or not. Not everything that we do is going to work out, and that's okay. If he doesn't care that it didn't work out. They just want to know that we're using the information to try and improve what we do. And then why did it work out? And then, of course, you're going to have to provide your requested information to your department chair. Hopefully in a timely manner. Alright. So I mostly, Jeanette, we covered that. How do the platters and the platters inform each other? So these are all questions that I got. And I got one question that said, I'd just like to see an overall cycle of our assessment or our process of assessment. And so that's what's on the next slide. You can see everything that we're doing, yes, it starts with the platter, but it also, everything is going to build or move into the next section. And so what we're hoping is if we do a really, really good job in the beginning, all of this information is going to feed over into the other. So we're not reinventing the wheel. A lot of times what is asked of you in these reports is taking the information that you have, maybe from a platter or a platter, and summarizing it together in the annual report for the entire year, the academic year, and then in the program self-study, 3 years worth of that information. And then what we're hoping is that information from the self-study will help us to complete our ADHD review if we have one, or your third-party accrediting body when you have a site visit, or like a self-study that's so you do that. So hopefully all of this information will keep us on track from going, oh gosh, it's time for that again, scrambling to complete all this information. Alright, so we're going to do the annual program report first. That made the most sense to me, since that's going to be due every year, and all of this information is going to feed into the self-study. So what I've done, Matt and I, we have just snipped each portion of the annual report. So when you look at the annual report this is sent out, this is what it's going to look like. And so I'm just going to kind of step-by-step explain through this. If you guys have questions, please let me know, because that's what we want to do, is make sure that you feel comfortable completing this one. And so this one is very self-explanatory. It's on the very front. It's just the information about your program. And then make sure that you remember what Sissy said. Thank goodness we're going to change that due date to August 31st instead of May 15th. You're going to see why it's really important when we get just a little bit further along, because we have some graduate data that has to be in there for employers and whether our students are continuing on with their education or they have become gainfully employed, which is what most of our accrediting bodies Alright, part 2 is your assessment reflection. This is your platter information. So if you notice, when we met last time in this big faculty Friday, we decided that not every one of our program level outcomes needed to be assessed every So we assign years to those assessments or those outcomes. So that's what you're going to place here. We're not assessing every platter outcome every year anymore. And so whatever year you're working on, that's going to be the outcome that goes into this portion. Your assessment results and your benchmark, and then remember whether your benchmark is met or unmet.
Hey Jessica, I got a quick question.
Yes.
Refresh my memory on how did we write that down on which ones? Is that?
We wrote ours down on our platter that we keep in our agency.
Okay.
So year one, this is what we're gonna do, year two, this is what we're gonna do. We have 3 program level outcomes, and so that works for us,
Okay.
where we just assess one every year, and then by the end, we've assessed all 3 of our program level outcomes. Several people are really concerned anytime they come talk to me that they're not meeting their outcomes. And so I want to reiterate that it's not that important whether you're meeting your benchmarks or not. The important part is, what do you think is the reason that we're not meeting our benchmarks? It could be lots of things. It could be the cohort of students that you have. It could be a small number of sample that you have. It could be that maybe we had a flood and we didn't get to finish that class. It could be any of those reasons, or maybe we just decided we needed to cover it a second lecture period instead of breezing out through it because we thought the students would be fine with it. HLC is not concerned that we have 100% on all of those things. They want to see that we're using the data from these benchmarks to make meaningful decisions regarding our curriculum or our approach. And this is a constant cycle of assessment and improvement. So whatever we're doing, they don't care necessarily the outcome, they just care that we're using that information in order to make changes. Okay. All program faculty and staff must meet at least once annually to discuss assessment results. Okay? I know that that should probably be documented somewhere. And you're probably going to want to use those minutes or those discussion notes in order to complete the questions that are on this annual report. Okay? So, did your assessment results match what was expected? Explain why or why not. Those are going to be your benchmarks. Okay? That's what I talked about just a second ago. Maybe it was just a bad cohort of students. We know every once in a while we get a group. Allied Health is that way. They just weren't as strong as the group before. That doesn't mean that necessarily our assessments aren't good, and it doesn't mean that we need to necessarily change what we're doing. On some of ours, we put, we're going to go through another cycle before we decide what we're going to do. Okay? That's the rationale behind why our benchmark wasn't met. What do we think is going on? We're addressing it. We know that it might be an issue, and if it doesn't change, then we're going to make a change the next time. It could be a poor assessment tool. We have all found, every time we do this together, that what we came up with in the very beginning, it was a great start, but we're a lot smarter than we used to be about assessment. And so maybe it's our assessment tool that is causing us to have poor scores on our ratings. So we might need to go back and rework that. Based on these results, what conclusions can be reached regarding teaching effectiveness in the program, what worked and what didn't? These are going to be the comments and revisions that are on the bottom of those platters and platters. Probably, in my opinion, the most important part of the platter and platter. If you said that you would make a change on your last submission, did it work? Why or why not? Okay. So if we're saying on the platter, yes, our benchmark wasn't met, so the next time we're going to spend a little bit extra time doing this. Talk about that. Did it work? Maybe it wasn't, that we just didn't go over it. So again, whether it worked or not, and then what you're going to change during the next cycle of assessment, or that next semester, if it's a platter, the next program, which is probably the next year, semester or year, for your platter. 4 and 5 are going to be, 3. Where does your program, what are your program's best practices in in the assessment of program level outcomes. So, we talked about where does your program really shine as far as program assessment. So we all know that there are some areas that aren't that great, but there's also areas that we do a really, really good job with our program level assessment. So that's the part to put in there. Gotta brag on yourself before we talk about 4 and 5, which are the challenges. Excuse me, challenges. Did your assessments work? Sometimes those just need to be revised. We have come up with in our department, sometimes we just have bad timing in our assessment. And so, one of our assessments we didn't even get to complete because it should have been placed at the beginning of the program or that course, and it ended up at the end. Based on that assessment, we realized we needed to make a change there. We didn't have to go through any committee, it didn't have to go through anything like that. We just decided the next time we teach that class, we're gonna start off with that instead of end with it. That's what HLC is hoping that we're gonna get from these discussions. And then I have another example that the year the outcomes are assessed, the courses or information is not available. Okay? And so we kind of talked about that as well. In your, this kind of goes back to your curriculum mapping and what we have as mastery. Just because you're not teaching that course, that we are mapping a mastery level outcome in the semester that we're collecting it, go ahead and keep that information, all right? And then you're just going to submit it in the course that it is requested. But again, we know that not every time we offer that course or not every time we collect that data, we have a really strong cohort of students. So we're going to call that in mind. And then 6, reflect on any changes that you made in the last academic year. These are any changes that would have any impact on student learning, not just a benchmark or an assessment tool. Okay? Any impacts on student learning, even if you aren't reporting it. And all of this information should come from a summary of this department meeting that you should have over assessment. Okay? Any questions? All right. Program retention, completion, and persistence. So what we get every year, or what we have to report out, I know in Allied Health, and even when it was just considered tech ed, we got these numbers sent to us, and we had to include those along with our portfolio. I know some of you calculated these, but what we always have those per instructor. And so now what we want is for those instructors to submit that information, their retention information, to whoever is responsible for preparing this program report, and then it's going to be reported out by course, which I think is probably more valuable information. For instance, English. So we have more than one English instructor, correct, that teaches English 1. So now we're going to know how many A's, B's, C's did we have, or how many students did we retain or lose in that entire English course, not just a course taught by working students. Okay? And so all of those numbers should be sent to your program chair or your advisor, whoever's responsible for preparing this. That way they can collect all the data and then aggregate those results together. Does that make sense, everybody? All right.
And just on that may be something that Shana is able to do for us with Pro. In the past, it is not something boys can do, so there may be a reporting mechanism for that, but we're unsure if there is.
Yes, there will be one overall, but it will be very limited.
Clarify, because I can see that English department can be.
And you could choose, Donna, as dean, you could decide to sort this out and make a chart for each department.
And
To
then
improve the
aggregate all those
communication,
results.
presentation and communication piece of this report. That's certainly.
Yeah, you may have to have all of their numbers and all of their numbers. Like take one, like title this, English reports, grade distribution.
Okay.
And then do all the English reports, and then do the science reports. Any other questions? And let me go ahead and address that too. I know a lot of these genetic faculty probably are wondering about, the relevance of this for you. I can say two exceptions. Janine, you cover a program, Amy, you're covering a program, and there are probably a couple of others. But a lot of you just teach courses toward the AA, and so you're probably thinking, well, if Donna's going to do all of that for me, this is not really relevant. But to reiterate what Jessica said, first of all, you'll be asked for some information. Second of all, you need to understand the process. We've got monitoring reports very soon, another comprehensive visit very soon where you can be put on the spot and asked. But Donna can also decide, just because she's over the AA does not mean that she's responsible for doing it all. She can delegate any of this to any one of you. So you may be asked to fill out, an entire chart. You may ask your department head to oversee completing the chart for English, science, or any other component of this report. So genetic faculty, I just say, if you're feeling like this is not relevant, please try to pay attention because you may be assigned portions of this. And to me, if I know the reason that somebody's asking me for the information, it makes it a lot easier for me to want to do it, number one. And number two, to give you the right information the first time. So that's the reason that everybody's doing it. So. Okay. And then this is going to just piggyback off of the other slide, the previous slide was our grade distribution. This is going to be our retention and completion, okay? And so it's divided in your fall and spring semester. So remember, we'll have one of these for every academic year, and that's the reason we just have fall and spring. So reasons your students drop, hopefully we know that in the programs, it's a lot easier. I keep saying that, I know that it's going to be its own program, but we have a lot more of that information, but we're able to give these things. Number of students referred to early alerts, activities supporting completion, retention, and persistence. We want to know, are those activities that we're doing, are they working, are they beneficial to keeping our students, or not so much? Maybe we need to focus our area somewhere else. And then your program faculty and staff that are participating in recruitment maneuvers, okay? Or recruitment activities. And so we wanted to make sure, again, that manpower that we're using to make sure that we're getting students here and that they are staying is working. Maybe we need to focus somewhere else. Every faculty member will send this information to their program chair, and all this information will be compiled to represent the entire program.
Hey Jessica, I have a question. Number of graduates referred to early alert, is that something we'll get data on?
Yeah, I'm assuming that we can get the just numbers as far as early alert. I don't think that it would be very difficult in like our programs to know how many students that we sent to an early alert, that we sent an early alert on. I know like we don't use it that often because we have a formal like counseling sheet.
Right.
And so to me, I would put that in my report, in our adult programs when we pull them into the office. Okay, and what we're trying to have
4,984 times a semester.
not for everything, but what we're trying to decide is when we're contacting these students, we're trying to make sure that they know we're aware that there's an issue and we're trying to get a hold of that issue early. Is it working?
So that was my question, because we haven't been doing the formal thing,
Right.
And this new alert system just started this semester.
Will you just put what that program is doing?
Miley, I believe it's under this new alert system, she's communicated with me, she will be able to get you numbers, she can keep up with it through this new system.
But just for this past semester, so everything else we've got to,
So if
we'll have to have it for our 3-year report.
Yes.
So do we need to change our system? I mean, right now, we
do we need to change our system to include the early alert? Because we're already doing a formal write-up, the students signing it, we're signing it. So,
Yeah, focus, as Jessica, I think, was kind of alluding to, look at the intent of this, not the exact language. The intent is to see if you are identifying students as at risk for some reason, document what you're doing with them.
and I can do that, I have to sign every write-up form, so I'll just start keeping a log.
I think it's the intent, like Sissy said, it's the intent behind this. Are we realizing that some of our students may not be coming to class because they don't have the gas money? We called them in, we talked about it, we got them some help. That's more important to me than
The
that you
system
filled
that
out
we're
the
using to
early
do
alert.
it.
That's just me. It's getting the same, process. It's the same end result, that's exactly right.
Not necessarily speak for Miley, but I know that she's usually the only one doing the early alerts. I guarantee she appreciates people going and doing what you guys are exactly describing. That sounds good. You know what I'm saying? So I wouldn't say that that's hurting anybody. Not staying within the exact letter of the law with it, you know. There's
Well,
a
we're
lot
trying
to
make
do
sure
if
that
you had to respond to every single
you're
person.
doing something.
Yeah.
That you're not, that you're aware you need to be doing something with students identified at risk, whether you're referring them to Miley or counseling them on your own.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like to me.
Okay, so, the retention and the completion portion, the next slide, Sissy. Yep, okay. Number of declared majors, fall to spring, and spring to fall retention rates, number of graduates, that's your completion rate, percent of graduates employed within 6 months of graduation, and then your percent of graduates continuing education within 6 months. This is the reason that we changed it from May to August. We couldn't change it, we couldn't push it back much further, because of the academic year that it falls in, but we wanted to give as much time as possible for us to complete or gather, this information. All of this is my understanding that we should be able to run a report in college to get all of these numbers, and so this might not be something, especially in the AA, that each faculty will be responsible for sending, but definitely all of our, technical programs or our, business and our allied health programs, we should have these numbers very, very easily, because we have to have these for our outside, accrediting bodies as well. And the percent of students who left the program, of course, this is our attrition rate. We have to report that as well. So the purpose of this, again, why we're doing it makes sense to me to help identify students that we're losing. Not just overall, not just students that are not returning to Black River, but is it program specific? Are there any specific reasons for that? So maybe it's because the classes aren't offered at the right times for the students to be successful, a lack of financial aid, graduates not going to work due to the surrounding job market. And so we want to make sure that we're addressing all of those things. Sometimes the information, not the numbers, but the information behind it may come from our advisory board committees as well. Alright. So this is spring 2019, and so our graduate information under spring, previous spring, that's gonna be spring 2018 and fall 2018. The number of graduates from the program, and then these are gonna be the actual numbers here again. And our third-party assessments were our licensure and exam rates, for those programs that, incorporate that are gonna go here. Our third-party assessment, for instance, in respiratory, we have PESI exit exam, that's gonna go here. Our licensure exam for our national board exam, all of that information is gonna go here. Hopefully, for programs like ours, it's gonna be very beneficial. We've tried to make sure that we would be able to use either this to complete our annual program report for like COARC or accrediting body, or vice versa. We're not gonna be duplicating this information, having to tell it twice. We're gonna be able to use it for both of those things. This year is gonna be the most time consuming, for this section. But every year after that, the information for the previous is just gonna come from the annual report that we already submitted, okay? And so while we know it's gonna be the hardest this academic year, there's light at the end of the tunnel. It should get easier and easier. Alright, continuous improvement. In general, how can the student learning be improved? What's the plan for increasing the number of students who achieve our set benchmarks? What changes should be made to curriculum prerequisites or course sequence? I think this comes from our curriculum mapping, some of the things that we just talked about today. If any changes should be made in the benchmarks or the assessment practices, and then what changes are going to be implemented and when. All of this information is gonna come from page 1 of this report. So the numbers and things that we completed here, we're gonna have our department meeting or our program meeting, and we're going to assess all of these topics, and then based on the results of that, we're just gonna summarize that here. If changes need to be made, remember those changes are the ones that are gonna go to the academic committee, so like the curriculum committee, the program committee, and then the assessment committee, whichever one it needs to go to. Use the following questions as prompts for discussion for the program's plan of improvement, persistence, retention, and completion. All of this information is the numbers that come from page 2 and 3. So after your meeting, after your program director, you gathered all of this information, or your advisor identifies areas of concern from those pages 2 and 3, then your meeting should be held to discuss the options for improvement, and then we're discussing those here. So we're not just listing out all of our completion numbers and all of our reports. We want to make sure that we are talking about those. You know, did we do a good job? If not just whether or not we did a good job, but if those benchmarks were met and why. Maybe we need to change something. Maybe we need to just continue on for another cycle of improvement. And then this is the last one for the program, the annual program report. Describe all of your program equipment purchases made in the last year and their impact on the program. Were those purchases that we made, were they beneficial or not so much? Sometimes we think, man, this is really going to help our students. We look at our survey results of what the students tell us they wish they would have had or what they liked about the course. We look at our advisory committee meeting minutes. What did our advisory committee think that we needed to add to our program? So, or our benchmark, we weren't as strong in that area, so then we purchased something. Did it work out? Maybe, maybe not. Discuss recommendations from the advisory board. HLC loves the ability to tie our advisory committee assessments or recommendations to the budget and the strategic plan. AA, you guys don't have an advisory committee necessarily, and so I would say that you're going to put an A there. Describe recommendations from the advisory committee that were not implemented and why. So sometimes they have suggestions for us based on the workforce. It's not necessarily possible for us to implement into our programs, and so we just need to put the rationale behind why we can do that. So we know that it's not going to be successful for students, even though they wish that we could do it. Then we're going to put that in. So.
Yeah, and Jessica, usually, sometimes one advisory board member will suggest something, and it's really not what they all want, and it's kind of hard to say.
One of times ours will say, you know, I wish that you would just leave one student here the entire clinical rotation. That way, you know, they would be really familiar with what we're doing here, and okay, well, that's not fair to the rest of our students, and it's not fair to you all, because you just get to see some of our excellent students who've had this one year. That's a very good reason. Alright, budgeting requests for the academic year. Be sure to provide justification or rationale for all these requests. This is for planning purposes. HLC really wants to see that. You heard them talk to us about our ability to ask for budgeting resources for our programs in that procedure. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to get everything that we're asking for, but it will help to provide justification what we're asking for when extra funds become available like grants, you know. And so when I was making my notes, I put a little laugh out loud there, because like we had extra money just laying around, you know. But that did happen to us. We had a little bit of grant money that came up, and we needed to find something that we were able to use. So we had to have justification for that, you know. Why should your department, why should your rest information put this and others have been needing money as well? Okay, and so that justification will come in very handy. Yeah, we used some of our workshop time already, so we're gonna, right here, I do have a couple of things I want to add, but what we'll do is go ahead and talk for lunch and come back and cover the self-study after lunch, and then in the remaining time that we have, we want you to go ahead and get a jump start on working on these that are relevant to your programs, okay? And for the gen ed faculty that are here, we will plan on meeting with, if Donna does not need your input at this point, we want you to meet with our concurrents that are here and have to allow them an opportunity to ask you assessment questions. That's something they should do. But I do want to add, in terms of prioritizing questions on the annual report, the last one here on the program budget section is the most important. Okay. So the reason, you may have wondered why we said some of the data was reported by course and not by instructor here. That is because these will be distributed to the budget committee and individuals making budget decisions for the upcoming fiscal year. And we didn't want that to be threatening to you all by having instructor names listed, but we did want them to be able to see it by course. But be aware that the budget committee will be looking at your responses here, and I talked with Rhonda. Rhonda expects anything put into the budget management module in quality. If it's a pretty significant request, she wants the information either duplicated here or your justification provided here. So she's telling me that this is going to be used to make budget decisions as allowable for in the upcoming fiscal year budget plan.
Okay. I just wanted to mention that the deans have their budgets and have asked them to start thinking in terms of what increases they have for next year, and to include in that faculty professional development for every faculty member. So think about all these things, because they are looking at that. Wanda wants that back in a few weeks, so if you have specific needs for your program, make sure you talk to your deans about it.
And remember in your justification to use your data, and it works both ways. If you think that your program, your area is suffering significantly, and your assessment results show that, and you want something new, you can use poor assessment results to justify that. The flip side of the coin is also true. If you are really shining in a certain area, and you think, wow, we're doing such a good job, that means we deserve funding for X, Y, and Z. Assessment results will work both ways. So just be sure you're trying to justify it, and like I said, I'm being told this is going to be useful in upcoming decision making to our budget. That's all I have, and we'll come back and talk about the self-study. Come back at 12:30. Let's talk about, does anybody have any questions over the annual program report? Self-study.
So in other words, don't have
Please email all those questions to Matthew Johnson.
On self-study,
Oh, yeah.
the
He is at
Yeah, I think that's gonna be based on your accrediting body, and if you don't have that, for instance, currently have department, you could have it, you can shorten that window like we have to get with one. So we're just putting in something you have, and then have to include it budgeting. But that was the goal when stretching it out even to August. So just
most master information quickly. And so, like our employer surveys and all that, have to be, they're gonna do them at all. They're just gonna try to keep it as much as possible. Any other questions? Alright, so let's talk about shelf study. Alright, so this is the one that we're gonna complete from all of our annual reports for the last 3 years. These are only doing ones every 3 years, and we're everybody's are not gonna be due at the same time, so we have these on the cycle as well. And I'm gonna share that, the ones that are due this academic year at the end. But we wanna make sure that everybody understands they're not really gonna be in the same as everybody else's programs. We're kind of all on different schedules, which is good because we can help each other. So, on the program introduction, provide a brief history of the program. This is not like the day that the ERTC started offering this program, okay? We don't care who started it or, what they are doing now, but we want to know how has the program progressed. So have we made significant changes to the program, like the length of the program has changed? From a 3-semester to a 4-semester program, where the modality has changed. One of our didactics programs now is completely online or it wasn't before. That's significant. That's what we want to know. Has the degree that we offer changed? Was it at a CG before, and now we offer a technical certificate, or we offer an associate degree? So that's what we wanted with the brief history. Describe the program's relationship to BRTC's mission and the other BRTC programs. So everybody knows the BRTC mission. All of your programs should have a mission statement as well. And so you're going to list your program mission here, and then how it relates back to the BRTC's overall mission statement. 3, provide documentation of the program's market demand and industry need. We can get these, it says, from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, information gained from the advisory committee, and data from recent environmental scans. Is this, what we want is the program in high demand? Right? And are there jobs for all of our graduates out there? And so I think a lot of that information we're getting from our advisory committees, and then of course those graduate employer services. 4, document student demand for the program, and we want this information to come from the student surveys and also data from the Office of Enrollment Management. So not just how many people are enrolled in our programs, but what's the interest in our programs. From things like our preview days, our career fairs, things like that. Are those things that we're attending, are those proving beneficial as far as numbers go for the school?
What application numbers were,
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah. But how many applications do you have versus how many? Absolutely. List your program's learning outcomes. These come straight off of your ladder. And those shouldn't change in that 3-year cycle unless those have gone to be assessed. And then the last bullet point on here, provide the program's goals for retention, completion, graduate transfer, and graduate employment. These are going to be goals that each program sets for themselves as far as what we hope to accomplish in that 3 years. Some of those goals are set by your accrediting body, and some of them will be set by your programs. Alright, program curriculum. So we're going to provide an outline for the program's curriculum, including the recommended,
Where do we find this report? The blank copy?
Sissy has emailed it, and we can send out more copies of that.
Oh, okay.
But
It's not on the portal?
It is on the portal. Sissy said it's on the portal.
Under,
It's on the program.
you go to assess,
I'm under assess now.
employee support, go to assess it, it's on the right hand in the folder.
The portal, I looked on the website too. See, that's assessment.
It says annual program report template. Are you where it says assessment and accountability, the circle, colorful circle?
Go back to.
You see the arrows,
Assessment and accountability, and then over there in the
annual program report template.
and it's not study.
You'll see the
Two
light
different
bulbs.
assessment tabs.
On tab.
And then it opens, yeah, down there as a Word document. Yeah.
Thank you, sorry, didn't mean to stop everybody.
Okay, under program curriculum, we're gonna provide an outline for the program's curriculum, including the recommended sequence for these courses, and include any gen ed requirements. So all of us should have done this already, where we mapped our program, curriculum, as far as introduction, reinforced, or mastery to our, program right now, alright? And that's what we're talking about when we decided that maybe we needed to change some of the sequencing of our courses. So we want to put that on there, but some of you may not have put your gen ed courses along with that same, map. And so we want you to include those gen ed courses as well. For core program courses, indicate the semester or year that they were most recently offered, and we should be able to get that information from the registrar's office. So when it was most recently offered, because that may be an issue too. Some of our students may not have access to those courses at the time that we say they should be taking. In Appendix A, that's where we're going to attach the course syllabi for all core program courses. Alright, or Appendix A, we're going to attach all of the syllabi just for the core courses of the program. We're going to provide the average instructor to student ratio in core program courses, and then provide a summary describing how the program curriculum has changed since the most recent self-study. Obviously, we're not going to have any changes for this first one, but with the next cycle of that 3 years, then we will describe any changes that we have decided to make to the program based on our assessment. And then make sure always, anytime we talk about any changes, include the rationale for all of those changes and when we started them. It's really important that we know when those changes were started, because that's when we're going to be looking for that data. And then discuss program curriculum, how the program curriculum reflects current thinking, trends in the field or trade, and your best practices. This is your point. This is really your opportunity to brag on your programs again. This is the evidence to show that our programs are current in their field of study. We hear all the time that students come here because we have the best technology and we're the most state-of-the-art. Everybody that graduates from our programs, they know exactly what we wanted them to know when they go into the hospital. And so that's what we want to make sure is that we're not teaching outdated information and we're current as far as all of our technical programs, the allied health programs, and things like that.
I know some of this doesn't seem as relevant to some of you because you're not doing that this year, but I do ask that you please, if you want to pull one of these up and work on it, as Jessica's talking and make notes, that's fine, but please, if you're doing something on the computers, I want you to be sure it's relevant to this presentation.
Alright, so instructional modalities is next. We have made significant changes in this department, I feel like. We have a completely online available associate of arts, and we have other programs that are available completely online. So the number of course offerings that we offer here in different modalities has increased greatly. So what we want you to do, this first bullet point, is just list all of the instructional modalities that you use for your core programs, okay, or your core program courses. This will include your face-to-face, online, hybrid, CDN, core, and AV. We want you to provide the same information for any of those prerequisite courses. So you'll keep those separate, but we want to make sure that we are listing any ways that we're teaching
Describe the instructor to student and student to student interaction within those distance ed courses. And then they want you to include a discussion indicating how these instructors communicate and how the student feedback is provided. What we want is to make sure that there's equitable interaction among all modalities that we offer. So if a student comes and they take a face-to-face class, we want to make sure that they have that same opportunity to interact with students and to gain feedback from their instructors that they would online. We want to make sure that those are equal. How do we make sure that the online student is engaged with classes just like they would be here, and that they're receiving that appropriate feedback? Discuss how student identity is verified in distance delivery courses such as VoiceThread, Respondus, and Lockdown. So we have to make sure that we are proving academic integrity among all of our online students, just like our face-to-face students. And then summarize any results of formal reviews that Distance Ed has completed the review, and so if they've completed one of those reviews for one of your online classes, Regina told me that you can request those from either Matt or Regina, and they will get those online reviews of your, they will get those reviews of your online classes. Any questions about that one? Okay, program faculty. For some programs, this is going to be a real short, like one line, and some, like the Associate of Arts, is going to be very lengthy. So what we want is all program faculty, full-time and adjunct. We have to have their credentials and or their licensure or certification if they have it, the number of years that they worked in that program, the number of courses, and the number of credit hours taught for that first academic year. So most of our program directors, I think, will have this information. But again, if you don't, then I think that information should be available from HR, those personnel information sheets. And so we're going to keep separate the full and adjunct faculty, but we're going to list everything. Okay, program resources. Describe the institutional support available for faculty development and teaching research and service. In addition, we should describe the professional development for full-time faculty over the past 2 years, including the institutional financial support provided to the faculty for these activities. So we want to know our meeting and in-service requests, our budget requests, field trip requests, and then make sure how do these in-services or projects get paid for. So HLC is very interested that our institution is providing the means for professional development for faculty. 3, describe how library resources are provided for the program. This is going to be any specific journals or publications that our library subscribes to or carries based on the need of your program. And so the library carries a specific journal for you, and we're going to list that there, because that should be a resource to our students that we're offering. Provide a list of program equipment purchases for the past 3 years, and then describe the effectiveness of these purchases. And this will just be a summary from the past 3 years of that section on the annual report. So a lot of these you're going to see that. It's going to be the same information that we put towards the annual report, only we're going to summarize all 3 years of that. So this is just going to be a quick guide for the last 3 years of the program. And then describe any purchases or budgeting needs that would affect or that enhance the program's effectiveness. And then again, we want the rationale. So if there's a need that hasn't been met during that time and it was placed on the annual report, then it can go here. And then also recommendations from our advisory committees. So this is something that we're saying kind of year after year, we can really benefit from having this in our program. And why? Again, those assessment numbers are going to be very, very helpful there. Okay, students. So we're going to complete this table. You can see it has year 1, year 2, and year 3. These are of course, academic years. So what I've done is, and this is gonna be information again from your annual report, I've placed in year 3 our self-studies in the week 2021 for my program. Okay? What we're gonna do is year 3 is gonna be 2021. And year 2 is 2020 and year 1 is 2019. And so every time we complete that annual report, we'll just go into that information in here. Half of your report is gonna be done, completed. So then, when you discover what year your self-study is due, you'll do the exact same thing, okay? Some of you won't have that 3-year cycle before it's due. We had to start somewhere, and so there's a list of what the
Hey Jessica, I just want to clarify. Are you saying like ours is due this May? We don't have to go back 3 years? Because I got Dana pulling data right now.
If you have it,
Oh, we actually send a report to the ASBN every year, so I have the majority of
it's
it.
not terribly difficult.
Okay.
Yes, please include what you have.
Okay.
There's not gonna be a hard requirement, to
Okay.
think updated that we weren't required to keep up with that.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Some of it we won't have as well, like platter
Right,
information,
right.
things like that, but everything that you can easily get your hands on, yes, please. I have one.
Which I submitted or similar. If you can pull that.
I'm gonna get a meeting
Yep, it's back.
as well, where we just have it in here.
In fact, I think most of them.
As soon as you pull it, so he'll pull a lot of it.
And then this next one is just going to be a continuation from before. It's gonna still be year 1, 2, and 3. And so the year that your self-study is gonna be due, it's going to be year 3. And these are again the numbers that you're gonna get from your annual report. We're just gonna compile all 3 of those years. Okay, providing a summary of grade distribution for our core program courses over the past 3 years. Again, that's gonna just be a narrative of all of your grade distribution from your 3 annual reports. Describe any strategies used to recruit, retain, and graduate students. So I have that you're just gonna summarize all of your recruitment events, your career fairs, your health fairs, things like that, that our programs are involved in order to manage students into our programs. Any strategies also that you use to aid in retention? And then describe whether the program is meeting its goals for retention, completion, graduate transfer, and graduate employment. This information comes from the goals that we set in the program introduction on that very first page from the last self-study. Okay. So right now, we're not going to know if we are meeting our goals for retention over the last 3 years. Okay. We'll know what we're hoping to do year to year, but we won't truly have an answer for this until we do the second cycle of the self-study. And then lastly, provide job placement information for our program graduates, including the number of graduates placed in jobs. Career or tech programs must include the following: names and locations of companies hiring our graduates, an hourly rate of pay for the graduates, names of companies requiring a certificate or degree for initial or continued employment. Okay? And so all of our technical programs, all of our allied health programs, we get this email every semester asking us to provide this information anyway, and so now it's all going to be located on this board. And also this information will just come from our graduate surveys and our employer surveys as well. Okay, program assessment. So you're going to describe your program's assessment process. For most of us, it's going to be very, very similar. exam and entrance exam. Nursing uses ATIs. Do you use special projects or papers as part of your assessment plan? We really want to be learning from each other here, so that's a very good way to get everybody's assessment. Summarize the results of the program assessment of its learning outcomes over the past 3 years. So Appendix B is going to be all of your platters, okay? And so you're just gonna attach that as Appendix B, just like we did the syllabi as Appendix A. And then during the summarization, we're just gonna take all of the comments or revisions or anything like that that we have put into the platters for the last 4 years. The third bullet point here, we're going to describe a program exit or capstone requirement, if any. So I gave some examples here that you might not be thinking about. We have a Gen Tech and an AAS Gen Tech capstone that we use, a nursing comp predictor, an RT exit exam, the medics use FISDAP. All of these things are specific only to those programs, and so we want to list those there. And then to follow up on that, we want the scores for those exams for those program completers over the past 3 years.
Oh,
That's just
yes.
an overshare. What?
I said, oh, yay.
I know, right? Okay.
Oh, my God.
We're also going to provide in this section results of student, alumni, and employer surveys completed over the last 3 years. And then provide information on how assessment results have impacted the curriculum over these last 3 years. Okay? So what changes have we made based on those assessments? And this is what we're concerned with, that meaningful assessment again. Okay, so we took that information and what changes did we make because of it? We're not just collecting it just because our boss is told us. Program effectiveness.
What? We're not just told.
We have to use it. We have to use it.
Tell them I'm
List the strengths of your program. This is your bragging rights again. Tell us why your program's amazing. We already know it is. What are you doing great? That you want everybody else to know. If somebody asks you what's so great about, the business program here at PRPC, that's what you would put. Okay. And then we know that 2 and 3, every program, every faculty, every course has room for improvement. And so we're going to list the areas of the program most in need of improvement. Okay? So this is going to be a reflection back on where you think that we can do better. Sometimes the best conversations and ideas come from reflection, not only on what we do really well, but what we can improve. And then list your improvements that you have accomplished in the last 3 years. Okay? So maybe you did have a deficit or a weakness in some area, but we really want to outline that we have taken that idea that we need to do a little better in that area and we have improved. And then describe the planned program improvements, including a timetable and the estimated costs, and identify your program improvement priorities. This is going to be your action plan. And so they want to know your long-term goals. If we're going to make changes, what are we going to do? Those changes can occur overnight. So when are you planning to implement what changes? If it's going to cost any extra money, we need to add an extra faculty, or we need to add this piece of equipment. How much is that going to cost, and when do you hope to accomplish it? Okay, and all of this information is going to come from your departmental needs. Okay, so really it's just going to be summary. You can see the self-study is a lot more summary, where the annual report was a lot of numbers. Okay. So these are the programs that have a self-study that are due this academic year based on our list. Okay? They're going to be auto collision, medical office administration, phlebotomy, industrial electricity, auto collision, cosmetic repair, machine tool technology, welding, and practical nursing. So just because your name is not on this list, you should be working on it so that you won't be starting from scratch when you're at your program is or something. And that being said, every program has an annual report that's due every year. And so if you're smart, which is what we hope you're gonna do, is complete that self-study information from your annual program report as you have it, and then you won't be scrambling the last week of August. Are there any questions over the annual report or the self-study?
Jessica, I want to say thank you for going over that. I know a lot was repetitive, but bringing it all together and hearing it again, it just helps since we're still in the early phases. Thank you, you did a great job.
Thank you.